Hello. How is your week treating you? If you are new around here, then welcome. My name is Carrie. I go by Build a Wall of Books on most of my platforms, and you may have guessed it, I love books. Mainly talk about books. Sometimes we do a bit of adventure, van life, history, and heritage, with a sprinkle in of spooky stuff. I've just given you my entire personality there. This isn't going to be a particularly long video, but grab yourselves a drink. I've got lemon and turmeric today, and let's get into my January reading wrap up. This is going to be the condensed version. January was a good month. I read 10 books in January, and for the most, I really enjoyed all of them. I read a total of 4,013 pages, and I was trying to do the Storygraph January Pages Challenge, but I just missed so many days. So I am really shocked that I got through 10 books. I don't normally do the moods of my books, and all of my data I get from the Storygraph, which I find just so accessible and works for my brain. My moods of books were adventurous, emotional, and they were emotional, and tense. Most of the books I read were between 300 and 499 pages. And as is normally the case, overwhelmingly I read fiction. 90% was fiction. Top genres were fantasy, that's not a surprise, young adult, romance, and just behind that was historical. Three that were tied, and they are just behind, were LGBTQIA+, mystery, and horror, which, if you've been around any of my channels, you know I am not a big horror reader, but I did read some horror this month, and I surprised myself. My top reads this month were a memoir first up. This is Stay True by Hart. This is a coming of age story that focuses on a really tragic event in Hart's life. It made me cry, it made me laugh. Definitely check the content warnings. But I really loved it because it was a coming of age story that was set at the same time as I was coming of age. There were loads of anecdotes, loads of cultural references. It focuses on music and zines and counterculture. And who was better, Oasis or Blur? Or were they actually both rubbish? This was named as one of the top 100 books of the 21st century by the New York Times, and I can totally see why. Quicksilver by Callie Hart. I really put off reading this book, mainly because my brain works in a way that if it is incredibly popular and everybody loves it and it's kind of non-problematic, I will put off reading it because I just don't want to. I put too much pressure on myself. I have too many expectations. So I was late to the game on this one. Of late, I've not really been loving romantasy, and that's probably another factor. It is a chunky book, over, I think it's around 600 pages, but I really enjoyed this. There was a point where I almost DNF'd, and I am so glad that I didn't. It is a fae story, but there is a twist, which I'm not going to go into. There is a lot more going on in this book. I loved the alchemy, and I really enjoyed this, and I cannot wait for book 2 because the ending on this was ridiculous. Like I said earlier, I am not a natural horror reader. In fact, I am a massive baby. So I tend to steer clear from certainly adult horror. I do love a ghostly, creepy gothic story, and I do love YA horror, apart from Clown in a Cornfield, because clowns are not my thing. I was sent a copy of Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by the lovely Book Break team and joined in on their read-along. If you haven't had a chance to join in on one of their read-alongs, they do them over on Storygraph for the most, and the effort they put into the prompts and the discussion is fantastic. So I read this and wow, I loved it. I absolutely loved this book. Were there parts where I thought I wanted to claw my insides out? Yes, absolutely. I definitely think this is one to check your triggers for. The story revolves around a group of women. I'm going to say girls because they are teenagers who find themselves in a house for unmarried pregnant mothers. And they're sent away by their families and they're not treated very nicely. Some of the scenes around birth are challenging. I am a mum of three, and I have to say that I had really good experiences, but still I found them challenging. I did a lot of crying. There's a lot of empathy for this, and I think it's got a really I think Grady Hendrix has done a really good job of, focusing on history that isn't too far in the past in America. I think there's a real risk in the moment that actually it's not history at all. It really hit home. Like I said, I had so much empathy for these characters. There is obviously witchcraft involved. I'm not going to go into details, but it got dark, it got twisted, and it got funny. Some of it was really funny, but I loved this book. I loved it. And now, obviously, I need to go and read the others. What would you recommend by Grady Hendrix? And if you have read this, what is the fear factor for me on the other books? Last of my top reads in January, and I am always. I didn't read any particularly bad books in January. These are just the ones that I really, really loved. And the last one was A Language of Dragons by S.F. Williamson. I loved this book. If you are a fan of Babel, or if you tried Babel and you like the entire concept of it, but you didn't find it very accessible, I think that you would love this book. There's no doubt that you have to make those links between Babel. We've got kind of magic realism, we've got a language and coding, but this also to me felt a lot like Divine Rivals. I just absolutely adored this book. I will say that the ending wrapped up a little quick for me. It is a standalone, but I do think that there are legs to go further with this. I think with books like this, it's difficult to give you an overview. It is dark academia, it takes place in an institution. There is lots that I would say links to Babel, Blood over Brighthaven. There is a hierarchy in society. People are treated atrociously. Viv, who is our main character, who I absolutely adored, accidentally starts a civil war and is put in a position that to save her family and to save the people that she loves, her friends, she ends up taking a mysterious job. But what she uncovers as this job progresses is way, way bigger. And Viv finds herself having to work out who she can trust, who can she trust. There is pining in this book. There is a romance, but it is very secondary to the plot. There's deceit. I loved it. It was absolutely incredible. And for me, this is probably going to be the top Black Dragon book that is coming out in 2025. This is also the Fairy Loot edition, which is absolutely stunning. Highly recommend. And that is my January reading wrap up, condensed with all the stats. May try and do all the books I read in January, the books that I loved, which I've spoken about, and maybe I'll go into a little bit more depth. and the books that I really, really enjoyed, and some of the books that I didn't enjoy so much because I didn't get them. I really hate doing this, but if you do like these videos, please think about liking, commenting, subscribing, and as always, take care of yourselves and bye.